Welcome back to the Hard Run Box podcast for episode 45. In this episode, we're going to largely be talking about Intel Arrow Lake rumors, the current expectations and leaks and things that have been happening over the last few weeks, because it seems like everything about Arrow Lake has been leaked up to this point. So we're going to be talking about what we're excited about, some motherboard stuff, the leak specifications and the positioning and things like that. A few other updates, a few small things, AMD AGESA code things, God of War Ragnarök testing, and yeah, that's really this episode.
Hybrid hot dogs.
Hybrid hot dogs is also part of this. So if you're wondering what on earth are you talking about with a hybrid hot dog, stay tuned to the end of the episode. So anyway, that's it. Let's get into it. Morning, Steve. How's the God of War Ragnarök testing going? Have you gotten into it?
Well, I have installed it. I have got it working. I've created my PlayStation account and linked to that, so that was a fun process.
And which you didn't even have to do.
Didn't you? It wouldn't let me get past it.
No, you can just click sign in, and then you can just click the X and get rid of it straight away.
I tried that and it kept looping back.
Really? It worked for me.
Oh, what the hell? Maybe you got a special key. No, well, maybe you can get past it. I don't know, but every time I had to verify and everything, it would not let me past. So, man, I got trolled by that. Anyway, got that done. That took 5 minutes of my time that I'll never get back. And then I clicked new game and I watched a cutscene, and that's about as far as I got before you were like, let's do the podcast. So here I am.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep. The start of the game is pretty slow going, so it's it's a pretty lengthy game. I enjoyed playing it on PS5, but it's obviously now on PC. Yeah, it's interesting seeing the comments on the Steam page about the PlayStation account stuff. Seems like a lot of people were leaving some negative comments about the PlayStation account linking, which to be fair, they do say it is mandatory on the Steam store page. I guess for me, it worked not having to link it. For you, it seemed like you had to.
Mine definitely did the whole okay, and then the white box reloaded and said, log in or manually do it or create a new account. And I clicked away the first time. It did that again. Then I verified the email address and it wouldn't do anything. So I closed it. It recycled again. I had to log in and then it worked. So don't know why it was like that for me, but it was.
That was weird. Yeah, I've seen some comments from people online that it is actually optional, despite saying that it's not optional. So I don't know what's going on there. So hopefully people, to be honest, linking an account, once you do it once, it's not that big of a deal. It's not, you probably shouldn't have to do it. It doesn't seem like I would have thought, for example, that if you're going to mandate PlayStation Network linking, for example, that I could then transfer my PS5 save to the PC version. If you're going to at least make people link it or heavily suggest that you're going to link it, make some sort of perk like that. But no, you can't do that. So there was no import my PS5 save to the PC version, which kind of sucks. That would have been nice to see. But yeah, it's a fun game. And it seems to run, at least based on the very opening section, pretty well. That said, it is a game designed for the PlayStation 4, so it should run well.
Yeah, I was only at 1080p at the time of doing it, but all the other quality settings were maxed out on the 4090. It was rendering over 300 frames per second. So
good sign.
Pretty good sign that you're able to get pretty high frame rates. There are very high frame rates. So yeah, Balin's actually playing it as we speak, so he'll spend the next hour hopefully getting me to a good place to do some testing. So that's good that I don't have to actually do that and I can just chat with you. So, yeah. Yeah,
nice. Well, at least he gets some fun times playing some games at work, which is always nice. That said, I don't think there's skippable cutscenes, so it's a bit of fun there. At least based on the section I was playing, there was no skippable cutscenes.
I was really hoping you weren't going to say, oh, you just have to do this, because I Googled how to skip the cutscenes in the game. Apparently, some people were saying in the menus you can go in and enable skip cutscenes, but I couldn't find such an option on the PC version, so not sure if that does or does not exist at this point in time. But yes, having to watch the opening cutscenes, being forced to sit through that for benchmarking purposes was less than ideal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very long game, so I'm guessing they're just thinking, everyone's going to watch all this stuff, but yeah, if you're repeating it or playing it again, if you already played the PS5 version like I did and you want to go in and check out some sections again on PC, you probably want the skip cutscene options. That's not ideal, but at least unlike some other games that have come out recently, it does actually have things like ultra-wide support and HDR support on PC. So I think a game like Space Marine 2 does not support ultra-wide. Final Fantasy 16, they didn't support ultra-wide either. So those ports not as great, and apparently the performance of Final Fantasy 16 on PC is not good either. Whereas the Sony ports tend to be pretty good. I don't think there's been a port that I can think of from Sony that's been, maybe The Last of Us Part 1 is probably the worst of them, but most of them tend to run pretty well, like Ratchet and Clank and Horizon Forbidden West run pretty well. Days Gone ran well. Ghost of Tsushima ran well. So most of those games, the PC ports have been pretty well featured and have got all the various different things. So anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about the first topic of today, something that you might have been testing, but we've gotten a lot of requests to, I guess, talk about the AMD AGESA code that reduces the inter-CCD latency for Zen 5, so AGESA 1.2.0.2. Obviously not obviously, I guess, with the Ryzen 9000 launch, the 9950X, it was discovered that inter-CCD latency was much higher than expected. So core-to-core latencies, if you're going from one die to the other die, was reported to be, around 200 nanoseconds, which is quite slow for this sort of communication. It was much higher than we saw from the 7950X, and people thought this was a bug. One of the many various different potential performance-limiting aspects of Zen 5 that needed to be fixed via various different codes and microcode updates. This AGESA update, as supposedly, at least based on the testing that other people have done, has fixed this problem, reducing the core-to-core latency when you're going outside of one die to the other die down to below 100 nanoseconds, which is probably where it should be. So still a little higher than you'd see from the 7950X, but much better than what the initial reviews were reporting. So I just want your quick opinion on this, because 9950X is not really a gaming part, but some people have suggested, will this improve gaming performance? What do you reckon? Will this do anything for gaming? Like, is this an issue for gaming?
Well, I can't imagine. So first of all, I found the 9950X so underwhelming that I didn't even bother testing the 9900X. So we've still got that fresh in drawer unused. So that tells you how excited we were about these parts. In terms of gaming performance, the 9950X was very similar to the 7950X. So that was what we were expecting relative to how the single CCD models scale, like 7700X to 9700X. We saw a very similar thing. So I can't imagine this has any impact on performance whatsoever. I'm also not really sure how overblown, let's say, this situation is. Like, obviously, higher latency between CCDs isn't great, but I've not seen any evidence that it was a problem for any of the workloads initially. So the video cards article that you've listed here for me to have a look at, the user that they're referring to claim that, their Cinebench score was improved by about 300 to 500 points, but that's less than a 1% increase in overall performance for that particular synthetic, well, it's not really synthetic, but that particular workload. So, and that's where you would see the biggest performance impact, right? Would be a core-heavy workload that has a lot of core-to-core communication between CCDs. That's obviously where this is going to, result in the biggest performance change. And the only report I'm seeing here is under 1% improvement, which is really run-to-run variance margin to error type stuff. So
yeah, I was going to say, like, how reliable is that 1% number? Like, it's
not very.
Who knows? You could reset your system. Cinebench tends to be a pretty sensitive benchmark as well. Like, if you've got background tasks or things running, it can affect the score. Very minor settings can affect the score in Cinebench generally. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to know with like synthetic tests how relevant they are for actual performance that you see. So obviously the core-to-core latency testing that's been done is using a synthetic tool to figure out what the communication latency is between the cores. But how well synthetic tests relate to performance, there's a lot of synthetic tests that I say are probably not that relevant. And it's certainly a nice thing to sort of see that, yeah, okay, if you keep your task within one CCD, the core-to-core communication is a lot faster than if you have to go to the other CCD, which just makes sense. It has to go through the IO die, so there is going to be some sort of latency penalty. But the reports are suggesting that this halves the latency when going to the other CCD, but it's very unlikely that you're going to get a half-time speed up, so like double the performance in any sort of application. And as you say, like the gaming performance scales pretty similarly. And generally games try and keep the entire game on one of the CCDs without, any sort of communication outside of that is going to impact performance a bit. So they try and do the best job of not doing that. So, yeah,
I don't think there's much to see here, to be honest. It was performing pretty well as expected for the day one reviews. It wasn't like we were confused by the 9950X performance. Having tested the 96 and the 9700X, the 9950X was, yep, that's what we expected to find, and that's what we got. So once I did that, I was like, you know what, I can't even be bothered with a 9900X review. It's just going to be more of the same. We know what to expect there. I'll just include that CPU when we do updated testing in the future, but it doesn't, in my opinion, it didn't warrant an individual review. If anything, I should have just chucked it in with the 9950X, but by that point I wasn't really keen on doing any more testing. So we just skipped it and left that for others to do. So yeah, I don't think there's really, I'm not going to dedicate a video to this testing. Once we get 24H2, I'll update all of our CPU results. I'll do so with the latest AGESA code, the latest BIOSes for all, AMD and Intel platforms, and we'll just move forward with that. There's going to be very little here to look at.
Yeah, that's what I would have expected as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about in the podcast, probably the main topic for this week, is, well, there just seems to be a lot of Arrow Lake rumors at the moment. And to be honest, it seems like pretty much everything about this part, except for maybe the performance expectations, has been leaked. Okay. So I feel like it's probably time to run through what we're expecting from Arrow Lake and what the rumors are currently suggesting. So there's a variety of different confidences in some of these things that we're going to be talking about. So we'll go through that as we go. But I'm pretty confident at this point that we will be seeing Arrow Lake in October, specifically an October 10th announcement and October 24th for the release of the processors. This seems to be pretty much confirmed at this point. This is what we'll be seeing, and was rumored since I think we heard October at Computex from pretty much everyone. So there's been no real change or delays or anything with these parts. It's been pretty much on schedule. And we've also heard for a while now about the naming of these new parts, which is probably something we can talk about because Intel is changing the naming scheme to the Core Ultra 200 series to align with their mobile parts that they've gone with over the last couple of generations. So they're skipping the Core Ultra 100 series on desktop, going straight from 14th gen to Core Ultra 200, which is, I guess, the 15th gen. So the model naming that we've heard so far is Core Ultra 9 285K for the flagship model, Core Ultra 7 265K for sort of the mid-upper model, and then Core Ultra 5 245K for the mainstream Core i5 equivalent, but it's Core Ultra 5 now. Anyway, what are your thoughts on that sort of naming? Is this better than what we've had?
Core i9 14900K, Core Ultra 9 285K. I mean, neither are good. I feel like the Core Ultra is pretty bad, but I don't know. It's one of those things, once you get used to it, it'll pretty much be referred to right as the 285K and the 265K and the 245K, because who's going to say Core Ultra 9? Like, that's just...
It's very clunky, isn't it?
It's so bad. It's definitely not an improvement on what they had, and what they had wasn't great. And we'd been living with it, because I remember when we had the Core i9 11900K, and that we started with the 10900K obviously, and I don't feel like, I don't know, that wasn't great when we went from the 19900K to the 10900K, but it felt bad around the 11900K and the 1200K, and then you sort of got used to it, but it still sucked. I don't know, whatever. It's a name. Ultimately, doesn't matter. If the performance is great, power efficiency is good. If it ticks all the boxes, or at least most of them, if it's a compelling product, then probably don't care about the name that much. It's the name, whatever. But evaluating the name, it's not great. Like, it's not a good name.
Yeah, I feel like there's too many words. Like, I know this is kind of nitpicking, but whenever I see a name, it's like, it's going to be the Intel Core Ultra 9 285K. Like, there's too much going on there.
The
Too many
Ultra
different
just
parts.
shouldn't be there, right?
Yeah, like, why is there the Ultra in there? Does the Ultra refer to something? Like, I'm assuming it means the higher performing parts as opposed to non-Ultra parts. And I believe with the mobile line, there are non-Ultra models. So you just get like Core 9 and then
But isn't that what the K was for?
That's what I was under the impression.
So,
So they've
like,
got the K.
Yeah, you get rid of the K or the Ultra, but you don't have both of them. So it's either the Core 9 285 or the Core Ultra 9 285. I'm sorry, the Core 9 285K. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not good. I like that they've shortened down the number down to 3. Like, that's good. It makes it a bit simpler.
Mm-hmm.
So 285 as opposed to 14,900 or whatever. And yeah, like 11,900 is pretty clunky. But I don't know what it is with these tech companies, and this happens across monitors, obviously, all the time. It happens with CPU naming seemingly all the time. Motherboards, MSI with MEG and MAG. Remember at Computex, they had to hand out a card to us that explained what MEG, MAG, and MPG was?
I think we both laughed, and I think we both had the same thought. We're like, if you have to hand out cards to tech enthusiasts to explain how your naming scheme works, that should have been all the evidence you need to be like, this isn't working. This is not a good idea. If we have to explain to the people that live and breathe this stuff how our stupid naming scheme works, not suitable for mass consumption, like very bad. We need to rethink this. But, you know, I mean, Gigabyte's gone all in on the stupid as well, all right? Like, you've got the AI top boards and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's the next level of bad.
Well, AMD has put AI in the name of their CPUs as well for the mobile stuff. They've got like the Ryzen 9 AI 285. Your lights have just gone.
My light just turned off. I don't know why.
Your lights have died. Is the power still on at your place? The generator's not kicking in or anything?
Nah, my computer would have turned off. That would have been bad because this computer's not on a UPS. This is my unimportant gaming computer. Well, I'm staying in the dark now. I can call
you're
Balin
in dark mode.
Balin, come and fix my light. I think he's like full on into the game with his headphones on.
Oh, is he playing it for real? Like, full engagement mode.
He hasn't moved. I'll check my light. Pause. Hit pause. All right, Tim, all sorted. Got my light back on. I also spoke to Balin briefly. He said, you will be so thankful you're talking to Tim. And I said, how could that be? And he said, because he has been watching cutscenes for the last 20 minutes. Non-skippable cutscenes. He's just sitting with his controller. He's like, I reckon any minute now I can play the game.
Surely there's a way to skip him. But anyway, we'll leave that for Balin to enjoy while we chat more about Arrow Lake processors.
That's right. I forgot what we're talking about.
Yes, Arrow Lake and the new naming scheme. We'll move on from the naming because it's much of a muchness. Intel just loves to change things up. And, maybe if anything, it's a good move for them to sort of move away from the 14th gen and 13th gen branding after they had the stability issues. And obviously 14th gen was kind of a disappointment. And even things like 11th gen were pretty underwhelming as well. So there's been a few of those.
Well, yeah, 11th gen should have never been released. We thought, and when we said that, we thought it couldn't get worse. But then 12th gen was very good. And 13th gen was a nice step forward. So, I mean, the power usage was dumb, especially for the Core i9s. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah, so we're even getting now box art apparently for these processors being leaked as well. So
exciting.
It's not that exciting, I'll tell you. I've seen the box. It's like whatever. It looks like a CPU box, but just goes to show that pretty much everyone is gearing up for this to be ready right now if we're seeing things like box art getting leaked. So the main configurations that we're seeing, or at least have been rumored for these parts, is the Core Ultra 9 will have 24 cores in an 8+16 configuration, then 20 cores for the Core Ultra 7 part, so 8+12, and then the 14 cores for the Core Ultra 5, so that'll be 6 P cores and 8 E cores. with no hyperthreading. So across the lineup, the P cores in this new Lion Cove design, I believe, has removed hyperthreading from that design. And then the E cores have also been upgraded to Skymont. So both of those are the architectures being used for Lunar Lake mobile parts as well. So it's interesting that they've removed hyperthreading from the lineup, or at least that's what they're allegedly doing. But I guess they're thinking that the performance is going to be good enough without hyperthreading that it's not needed. But no real change to the core count. So would you have liked to see more cores than 8 P cores? Or do you think right now, considering the E core is kind of, not really that relevant for gaming, is 8 enough? It's probably enough, right?
It's probably enough. It's hard to comment on how many cores these CPUs need without knowing how powerful the cores are. Because, as we've talked about many, many times in the past, it's not really about core count. It's about how powerful the individual cores are. So until we learn that, we don't really know whether it would be nice to have more of the P cores.
There will be downgraded clock speeds by the sounds of things. This is, of course, if these rumors and leaks and things are correct. The top tier model is supposedly topping out at 5.7 gigahertz. So that'll be down from 6 gigahertz on the 14900K. The Ultra 7 model, 5.5 gigahertz. That'll be down slightly, 5.6 gigahertz for the 14700K. It's not too much of a difference there. And then the Ultra 5 will be 5 gigahertz apparently, down from 5.3 gigahertz. So the thinking across most of the rumors that we've heard from Arrow Lake is increased IPC with the new core design, but a clock speed regression. So it's not that different going from 6 gigahertz down to 5.7 gigahertz. What was that, like a 5% reduction?
It's like a 5% reduction. It's very minor.
So it's a pretty minor reduction, and then hopefully the performance that we'll see will mean, if you get 15, 20% more IPC, then that's going to pretty easily account for a 5% clock speed regression. But we're talking about the peak frequencies for these parts that have been rumored. It's possible, of course, that the all-core frequencies or the core frequencies under heavy load will be more reduced compared to the processors that we've already got, like 14th generation parts. So hopefully that balance works out. There's still 125 watt parts, allegedly. So again, we don't really know what that's going to mean for power consumption, because how relevant is 125 watts for the current lineup? Not relevant at all.
No.
So that doesn't really tell us much either. But the general rumors and expectations, as I said, are slightly similar sort of performance to what we've seen, but hopefully increased efficiency. And like I said, IPC is kind of counteracted by clock speed changes there, and it's going to be manufactured on a more up-to-date process node as well. So that's all part of it. Obviously, as I mentioned, P cores, they're up to Lion Cove, E cores, Skymont. And the new platform, this is probably where things start to get more interesting with LGA 1851, because last week there were some rumors about what Intel, or at least how Intel are going to configure Z890 boards out of the box, where they will be shipping with a much tighter default profile. So instead of using the extreme profile, which again, they said sort of was a default profile, but whatever.
Well, it was the default. I mean, even then it wasn't. The default profile was to have no power limits and just run up the clock multiplier table. That was the default profile.
Yes. But then Intel went and made their own default that wasn't the default profile.
Well, they made like 6 of them. It was choose your own default profile.
Yeah, and then there was the default was also recommended, but then extreme was recommended, but not default, but it was default on most boards. Yep. Very, very confusing. Apparently, though,
by design.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, apparently with these new motherboards, the default profile will not be the same as the extreme profile. It will be some sort of lesser profile, but then you'll be able to enable some sort of extreme profile in the BIOS. So,
well, the default profile should be the default profile, and the default profile should be the same default profile on all motherboards. It should be a clearly defined default profile that is the same, and then the extreme profile should be an optional profile that is different.
That is theoretically what we will be getting. Of course, we're just going on what various different rumors and things are suggesting at this point. But yeah, I mean, we can't have a situation where the extreme profile is the recommended profile or is the I guess, the benchmarked profile for these boards as well. Like, we don't want to see Intel come out and test the CPUs on the extreme profile, but then actually the default profile is what they're recommending or is configured across those boards.
Yep.
So I think you'd want to see the default profile being a legitimate default profile.
Yeah, well, whatever the default profile is, whatever that ends up being marketed as, whether it's performance, extreme, whatever, you just need that to be the profile always. So you flush your BIOS, you update your BIOS, same settings. You get an ASRock motherboard, an MSI motherboard, a Gigabyte Asus motherboard, all using the same settings by default out of the box. That would be a default profile. Because if you start getting changes across different brands, then there is no default profile.
That's right. And one of the issues that we had talked about in some of our previous coverage of the whole stability issue thing was Intel not doing as much validation of motherboard settings, which we believe at least contributed somewhat to the issues that we saw with stability, because they just had said to motherboard vendors, do whatever you want and it's going to be fine. Whereas what we'd heard from board partners working with AMD is that AMD was much tighter with their validation for BIOSes and things, where BIOSes needed to be put through an approval process at AMD to be released. So, board vendors couldn't just go crazy with overclocking and various different settings. And that's also why they admitted fault for those 7800 X3Ds that were blowing up at launch on those, the couple of them that had issues on Asus boards. AMD came out and said, yeah, it's, we'll work to resolve that problem, because, well, they didn't really say this, but the implication was we validate these boards and it's kind of our fault. So we've got to make sure that we tighten things up on that front. So I don't know, would you hope to see Intel do more of that sort of validation side of things with this upcoming platform to avoid, stability issues and degradation for parts again? They can't have that happen again.
Well, yeah, by default, you would expect that to be a thing they do. But given it's been 6 years that we've been asking for this now, it would be a huge win. It'd be great for us just to actually have a clearly defined default profile that all motherboards should be using out of the box. So that means you install the CPU, your memory, all the necessary components. You hit the power button for the first time, does some initial memory training. You get to the screen where you can hit the delete button and go in the BIOS. You go into the BIOS and you load XMP for whatever your memory has. And Asus hasn't got some funny thing where it does different things to everyone else when you load that. You just load the XMP. It applies the appropriate memory settings for that kit of memory, the voltages and whatever. CPU behaves as it should. You reboot, you get into Windows, and you have, the right power targets. Everything is default. And then from there, you can clearly choose to go and then overclock the CPU or load some sort of custom profile. That would be great if we get to a situation where that is the situation.
And I think on top of that, one of the issues that we've talked about over those 6 years, and this is initially why we brought it up all those years ago, was issues with the lower end motherboards, that Intel would advertise performance based on these, not overclocked, but power unlimited configurations that you get from a top tier board. And then you could purchase a lower tier motherboard, and it turns out it's got all these power limits in place, like hard limits that you can't go past because the VRMs are too weak or whatever the situation is. And so Intel would be claiming a level of performance, but then if you bought the wrong board, you could have gotten a 30-40% performance reduction with those top tier CPUs that you'd be installing in those things. And this would happen with Z series or Z series boards, right? Where realistically a Z series, I should say Z, we're Australia, Z series board, that should run all of the CPUs at the level that Intel has advertised, because it's Z series, it's the flagship board series. So you should be able to be putting in your 1300Ks, 1400Ks, or the 285K when it comes out, no problems, no matter the board. So hopefully this default profile will also apply to the lowest tier boards. There can't be a below default profile that board manufacturers can get away with on
will be. That
the cheapest boards.
There's no chance they solve that. I mean, even AMD has that problem. That's just an industry problem that I don't think will ever be addressed, because there's no real pushback against it. the opinion of most people seems to be, well, if you're going to buy, a high-end flagship CPU, you're not going to min-max with your motherboard, despite the fact that, we know based on evidence that a significant portion of PC builders do exactly that. But, you're not going to buy a budget motherboard, a cheap motherboard with crappy VRMs and then put an expensive CPU on it, which, whether that is true or not, is missing the point so badly. And it's missing the point in so many different ways as well. It's missing the point in the sense that, so you just never upgrading. What's the point of the PC platform? Is it like just a lock-in platform like a console? You buy your parts and then that's it? And some people strongly believe that, that's it. You buy your CPU, you buy your motherboard, and then when you do it again, you buy a new motherboard. And maybe some people do that, but that's not, again, the point of the PC platform. The point is to have flexibility. If you buy a Core i5 processor or an Ultra 5 processor, Core Ultra 5 processor, and you want to upgrade to a Core Ultra 9 processor down the track, you have the ability to do that and extract the level of performance that you should be able to extract from that. So there's that whole side of things. Then there's just the fact that they're advertising support. So if you're buying a product and that product's saying that it supports the flagship processor at the expected wattage, which they usually just list the standard specifications, then it should be able to do it. And we've seen boards that, the CPU has 125 watt TDP, which is a meaningless statistic anyway. But in the BIOS, the TDP is limited to 90 watts because that's how bad the VRM is. So you're getting you're losing about 60, 70% of the performance that you should be seeing for all core workloads. And one of the other reasons why we brought this up 6 years ago and harped on about it for so long was because the TDP was a meaningless, the thermal design power. So we realized it's not a wattage of how much power the CPU is using. Really, it's about what sort of cooling you need to bring to the table to cool the CPU. And could you imagine putting like 150 watt cooler on a 12900 KS or 125 watt cooler on a 14900K?
Not good.
Yeah, not good. So the TDP just became a completely irrelevant, misleading, confusing metric or statistic that just didn't, specification really that didn't help.
Yeah, it was abused, wasn't it? Because a decade ago, the TDP and the power consumption of the processor were pretty closely linked because there were no boost algorithms really. It was like
sixth, seventh gen was probably when it started to, I think it was 8th gen where it really, went astray there.
Yeah, so originally you could get a CPU and it would there was the clock speed and it ran at that and it consumed, under load, it would consume the power of that clock speed. And so the TDP that was listed would be relevant for that operating condition. And then Intel went with this whole system of we're going to boost for a short period above this power limit and then drop down to the power limit later. And we're still going to advertise that as having the power limit where that's 95 watts, 125 watts or whatever, even though there will be a period the CPU is running above that. And then over time that merged into what we're getting now, which is, well, instead of dropping down from that boost configuration to the long-term power limit, we're just not going to do that. So we're just going to run as high as possible, but we're still going to advertise the same 125 watt power limit that really isn't going to be used in any long-term workload. And it got to the point where Intel, even they stopped advertising that boost then dropping down performance. They were just saying, we expect this to run PL1 equals PL2. This is the performance that you're getting. So I think the advertising angle with the motherboards is really the thing that gets me the worst is, if you're advertising this board supports the top tier CPU, then that should mean this board supports the CPU with the performance Intel advertises. Not this supports this CPU as in it loads and works and you can run the operating system. It should mean you're getting what has been advertised to you. And that just hasn't been the case because of all the reasons that you've said. And there's obviously room in the market for cheaper boards that have lesser components. That makes sense. You don't want to be forced to spend money on VRMs that you don't need because ultimately you are buying a low tier CPU that doesn't require them. But that should be either clearly advertised, in other words, so this board doesn't support the Core Ultra 9 part or the Core i9 part or whatever, or it's a lower tier series like a B series board or some other platform that then Intel could say these are the boards that you get when you're buying the Core Ultra 5 or lesser parts. But they've abused the system to this point.
Yeah, I mean, the most consumer-friendly solution would be to have an obscure chipset that indicates that support. So it's not that some B series boards work and some don't, because that's still, a minefield. There's a C series or whatever of chipset that doesn't support K-SKU parts. Or maybe they work. They're unofficially supported, so they're not on any products, but if you happen to put the CPU in there, it'll work. It'll be thermally throttled or rather power throttled very heavily. So that would be probably the best way to address that if you still want to offer cheap, crappy motherboards for the entry level, so you can have budget business PCs, office PCs, that type of stuff. But yeah, look, the LGA 1851 platform is still going to have this exact same issue. I just hope that the Z890 boards, all of them can run the flagship part without thermal throttling. So that's sort of a minimum requirement there. And then when you get to, so it means at least if you buy a flagship motherboard, you're guaranteed for everything to work no matter what. And then if you go into your B series or whatever, that's when it's like, oh, this may or may not work.
I think that's a good way of doing it. I like the idea of, and this is just pure us having fun right now, right? Like we're hoping this is going to happen, but I feel like that's very similar to like G-Sync compatible and G-Sync monitors that you get, where NVIDIA only claims to support the G-Sync compatible branded monitors, but you can get any monitor that you like, plug it into your NVIDIA GPU, and there's a checkbox in the NVIDIA control panel. You just click that to get all your adaptive sync enabled. They're not officially supporting it. They're not claiming that it will work, but they're not restricting you from using it. And so while G-Sync compatible, I'm not a huge fan of that advertising. I think there's improvements that could be made there, but at least it's, if you want to ensure that you're getting the experience that has been validated to work, then there's options and it's clear what is what. And then if you want to go with the unsupported route, you can still do it, but they're not claiming that anything will work. Whereas with the motherboard side of things, with the CPUs, they're basically like, here's this big long list of CPUs that is fully supported. Like there's no indication in most of those lists that you're not getting the performance that's been advertised, or there's issues with it, or there's not some sort of full support. And how often have you seen motherboards that, you always laugh in the reviews about we're supporting ultra overclocking or whatever. This board's so well designed for overclocking, but then it's limited to 95 watts. Like that's got to stop.
Yes. Yeah, whenever I've called that out, they've quickly edited the website after that to remove that. Look, in some instances, that's just lazy copy and paste stuff from the higher end products. But yeah, sometimes it's just, deceptive marketing.
Yeah. I think overall, though, if I think about, am I excited for Arrow Lake? I think generally I am excited to see what it has to offer. I like, there's obviously some interesting things that are going to be happening with IPC, clock speeds, naming, core configurations. But the fact that this is a big overhaul and a new platform means that there's a lot of interesting things that could happen. Like we really don't know which way performance is going to go. And that always makes things at least a little bit interesting. And hopefully at the end of the day, these parts are worth recommending and are worth buying, because it's been a while since Intel has had a generation that has been very competitive and worth buying across the lineup. There's always been, especially with go back to 12th gen, for example, some parts of that lineup were quite compelling and worth buying, especially the lower tier parts. There was some great value 12400s and those sorts of things. But hopefully with Arrow Lake and the opportunity that's been given to them with Zen 5, that a lot of the lineup is quite good and improves upon the things that people are wanting to see Intel improve from, such as efficiency, platform support into the future, and while maintaining the performance that we've already seen across Intel parts. So I don't know, are you excited by these parts?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I was already very interested in them and intrigued to see what Intel would do towards the end of the year. Obviously, we had Zen 5 to deal with first, so that was where my focus was leading up to that launch. And then given how disappointing that was, I'm even more intrigued and excited and hopeful that Intel can produce something compelling here, which would be awesome if they can. So we'll see.
Yes, we will see. So, as I said, I believe we're going to be getting most of this information on Arrow Lake on October 10th. So we'll be hearing Intel's first-party performance claims in addition to lineups and those sort of things. And the initial lineup will include, as we've seen from previous Intel launches, the K-series parts first, or the Ultra series parts, Ultra and K-series parts first. And then later on in a couple of months, you'll see additional parts throughout the lineup. And there will still be, I believe, K and KF CPUs. Mm-hmm. So you'll get the same thing that we've seen for a while now, even though there is this rebranding, new architecture. There'll be models with the iGPU. There'll be models without the iGPU. And then later down the line, you'll get the locked non-K versions. Who knows? Maybe they'll actually unlock overclocking on all parts. We don't know. It's a new platform. Tim. Anything can happen. But they're not going to do it, right?
They're not going to do it. But no. It'd be cool if they did. But no, I can't see it.
So, I'm interested in that launch throughout the rest of the year because it doesn't sound like there is too much more to be released this year. The GPU lineups are still very much up in the air. I'm pretty confident RDNA 4 is not coming, but not sure what the GeForce and Battle Mage. It's too early to say at this point, which is usually not a good sign if we're not hearing too much about it at this point in the year.
Yeah, I think earlier in the year, the GeForce GPUs were expected and they were aiming for, end of year release, but sounds like that's all been pushed back now till hopefully early next year. As for Battle Mage, no idea on that one. I've not heard much, if anything, about that. So we'll see.
So that's our sort of look at Arrow Lake. Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about our boring lives. All right, Steve, we're back. What has been happening out your way at the moment? I was just actually there yesterday, so...
you're probably pretty up to date, Tim. I just nearly knocked my water over. No, I'm going to let this segment down. I'm so boring, in fact, that I don't have anything boring to report. So that's next level boring. Happening. Yeah. Well, the weather has been atrocious. I do need to mow the lawns, but I haven't done that, so I've got no lawnmower stories. I haven't even done any lawnmower maintenance. I've been pretty busy, though, with work. So the second we finish this conversation, I'll be testing God of War.
Yep.
Hopefully Balon's got me to an appropriate location for doing the testing, and I'll probably do that all day today, all day Saturday, and all day Sunday. And the weather on the weekend the weather for the next 7 days looks to be pretty atrocious, so I might as well just be, do some work there. I've also been doing some 5800X 3D testing because I've had so many requests to do that. So I've done the 23H2 patch, and I'll compare that with 24H2 and compare that with the 9700X. So that is coming for those of you who are 5800X 3D enthusiasts, which seems to be most people. And then I've had, for those of you who are watching the YouTube version, a boatload of X870 E motherboards turn up. I've got, about 20 or more at this stage. So wasn't really planning on doing a roundup of those boards, but it was pretty easy to get all of them. And a lot of you were requesting that. So I thought, you know what, I'll do it.
I saw some of the testing that you were planning to do on it, and it looks like it'll be the most in-depth motherboard content that we've ever done. So I'm very keen on seeing that.
Yeah. So that'll take up a lot of my time, but I can sort of do that in the background when I'm got a bit of free time. So, but none of the projects that I'm doing around the place, none of my extension work, and none of that's been happening because the weather's been bad. So just work, and more work. So that's my life, right?
Well, it does seem to be the case with the amount that you say that you work. So that makes sense. Yep. So I've got a few things to talk about. So hopefully I'll save this section a little bit. One thing that I wanted to talk about, this is something I've been using for a couple of months now that was sent to me just out of the blue. I think, so I've got here, again, for the video version of the feed, as someone enters your office, I've got here the Keychron Q1 HE, which I think they reached out to Monitors Unboxed email or something, being like, hey, we want to send you a keyboard. And we get a lot of these requests. I'm usually just like, the usual spiel, right? We don't review keyboards. We don't really need keyboards or anything. You're welcome to send stuff out if you want to, but there's no guarantees that we'll talk about it or feature it or do anything because, again, we don't cover keyboards or accessories, especially when you reach out to Monitors Unboxed. It is a monitors channel. So anyway, they're like, yeah, whatever, we'll just send you a keyboard anyway. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, whatever, I might not even use this thing or whatever. It comes, like, it looks cool. So I thought, that, interesting. It came in the box. I was like, oh, this is a really heavy box for a keyboard. And I pulled it out. And again, it looks like this. So if you're seeing the video version, it's got white keys and white and black keys. So it looks cool. It's really well made. It's very heavy and very substantial. I thought, you know what? I just use a fairly standard Corsair mechanical keyboard most of the time. I'm a fan of the cherry red switches. That's what I usually use, like a fairly standard linear switch. I'm like, I'm not really in the market for changing my keyboard. I kind of like what I use. This keyboard is way better in every single way. I've been very impressed with this. So that's why I'm talking about on the podcast. It has gotten my recommendation as a keyboard reviewer now. So
good.
I use this wired, but it is a wireless keyboard. So if you do want to use it with Bluetooth or the included USB dongle, you can do so. It's got, hopefully you can hear this. It's got these Gatoron switches, which are magnetic or something. Now, I'm not a keyboard enthusiast, so I'm not up to speed with all the keyboard stuff, but you can change the actuation point of the keys. So if you want to have them super fast in a gaming configuration or more like a standard keyboard where it's not as sensitive, you can change that on the fly. And it can do some pretty cool things. So I'm using this just for my workstation setup for typing. I think it's a really nice experience to type on, much better than the cherry red Corsair switches that I was typing on. It's much more enjoyable. I don't know why that's the case. I just enjoy using it more. But for gaming, you can simulate things like controller inputs. So one of the obviously problems with gaming on a standard keyboard is you press W to move and it's either on or off, right? Like you're either moving or you're not. If you use a controller with the directional stick, you can sort of half move it or move it more or more. So
it's variable.
Yeah, it's variable. You can walk, you can run, you can really run on in.
So, to interrupt you, Tim, what's the keyboard called?
It's the Keychron Q1HE.
Keychron.
So basically with this keyboard, because you can adjust the actuation points and it's highly sensitive in that way, you can simulate controller inputs. So you can half press a key to have it to walk like a controller would and full press it to run, which is pretty neat feature, I thought. It's got sort of RGB lighting and stuff as well. And I'm not using most of those advanced features because I'm using it for a workstation just to type on. So I don't need things like the adjustable actuation points. You can do all sorts of things like you press it down and it does one action. You release the key, it does a different action. So you can configure that to use macros and various different things. It's a 75% layout, so it doesn't have a numpad, but I already use a numpad on the left anyway. So I'd already got a separate numpad for my previous setup, which I prefer using. And it's got tons of features. Anyway, when I received this, as I said, I wasn't expecting to talk about it or use it. I was just like, okay, cool, a keyboard. But I've been super impressed with this, and I would love to upgrade my keyboards to things like this in other areas because, yeah, the keys just feel awesome and it's got tons of features that I like. So good job, Keychron, for producing a high-quality keyboard. I believe keyboard enthusiasts are all up on this brand. Like it's one of those, if you're really into keyboards, they sell switches and kits and all sorts of different options for people to build their own thing. I don't know whether you can build your own things, but they've got, multiple different options and all sorts of different things. So anyway, Keychron keyboard, it's great.
The C1, so the wired version, just the base model, but with the Gateron keys, you can get that for $100 Australian. I think the one you've got, which model did you say yours was?
The Q1HE.
Q1HE. I can find the Q1 Max. That's $330, and that has Wi-Fi and. Anyway,
I think it's about a $350 Australian keyboard. I think thereabouts.
Cool. Well, but yeah, it looks like they have some affordable variants as well that look quite good.
They make like
They
I'm
make a lot
looking
of
on their
keyboards.
website now. They've got like 200 different keyboard options, custom stuff, different series, different profiles, all sorts of different things. Low profile keyboards. You can just buy switches and keycaps and all sorts of things.
I'm definitely going to look at buying one because I think I was using the Corsair because I like the wireless mechanical keyboards for some of my setups. It's kind of nice to have. But I was using, I think it was the K63 Corsair keyboard. Actually, I'll type that in just. And
I've got one of those somewhere.
Oh yeah,
as well.
very, very bad. Sucks. Very bad keyboard. Constant connectivity issues. I Googled it. Basically, everyone who's ever owned a K63 wireless keyboard has had the same problem. So, yep, not a good keyboard, the Corsair one, that one. So, yeah, I'll be looking at the one that you're using, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because over the years I've used a whole bunch of the different key switches and things like especially the normal things like Reds and there's obviously various different brands, but you've got the clicky ones, the very clicky ones, the linear ones, the fast linear ones, the silent switches and all those sorts of things. And I've always just settled on, using the Reds and they've been fine. And I didn't really think that other key caps and keyboards and key switches could change all that much about the typing experience. But there's just something about this keyboard that is just a lot more satisfying to type on. And I have to do a lot of typing. Like I have to write scripts and do all those sorts of things. So I type a lot. And it's not as loud as some of the Red and especially the clicky switches that you'd see from other keyboards, but maintains being very, I guess, nice to use, because often when you have a silent keyboard, they add in like rubber stops and stuff, which can make it feel a bit spongy and not nice to use. This keyboard is really well made, and it's also got this nice, I guess, knob on the upper corner that you can use for volume, which is a very solidly made thing. One of the Corsair keyboards that I've got's got the tumbler thing that you use for volume, and it just doesn't work. Like I scroll it up and it just does whatever it wants. I scroll it up and sometimes it turns the volume down. It's like, it's clearly broken or something. So yeah, this keyboard is really good. And I'm not sure whether I would personally pay $350 for a keyboard because that's a lot of money for a keyboard, but I would certainly consider some of their options, especially using a very similar key. If there's like a non-wireless version for my use case or something like that, that would be a little cheaper. I think that would be right up my alley. But yeah, a lot of people, I was looking online at like the keyboard Reddits and stuff to see what other people were thinking of Keychron keyboards and stuff. And some people, seem to highly rate these keyboards as sort of enthusiast options. So,
well, it better be good because I'm going to order one, Tim.
You're going to order one?
Yeah.
Are you going to get the Q1HE or you're going to go for a different version?
Yeah, I'll be going for one of I want the wireless functionality. Yeah. So I'll do a little bit of research after we finish chatting, but yeah, I'll be getting one. So as I said, it better be good or you owe me like $350.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many different options that you could probably buy a keyboard that is actually very different to this keyboard quite easily with all the different switches, because I think they offer things from like all the different switch manufacturers. So whether or not you get the Gateron key switches or Cherry or all the variants.
I'll go the Gateron ones because I've used a trillion Cherry MX switches at this point in time. So
just after something different. So anyway, thanks, I guess, Keychron for sending that out and reaching out and upgrading my keyboard experience. So like I said, there was no obligation for me to talk about it, but I decided that it is worth talking about. So there's that. The other thing I want to talk about, this is completely unrelated. I want to talk about Subway. The Subway restaurant chain, and restaurant is very loose definition of restaurant. Now in Australia, I don't know whether this is available in overseas. There's something at Subway called the Sub Dog, which is it is a hot dog made at Subway. So they take the normal Subway stuff, and instead of getting the normal meats or whatever, you can get a hot dog put into your sub. And this has been heavily advertised here in Australia. So I decided, you know what? This looks like complete crap. So I'm going to go to Subway and try the Sub Dog.
Interesting things you do with your time, Tim.
This is well, I'm a busy man, so
Tim's
I thought,
this looks like crap. I am going to investigate.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like trying new things, even if I think the new thing is going to be bad.
Okay,
just
good.
because, the concept to me of a hot dog made at a sandwich restaurant is kind of crazy to me. Like, there's no way that's going to work. They normally sell you bread and sandwich items they're not giving you a hot dog bun. It's not the footy where I'd normally get a hot dog or something like that, right? You can go and get a hot dog and you can add the normal, you could have lettuce in your hot dog. What's up with that? So anyway, I went to Subway.
I would see this and be like, okay, but go on.
Yeah, well, I've got a boring life, so I'm going to do boring life things like ordering hot dogs at Subway. Anyway, I go to Subway, get the sub dog. I get it just exactly how they've advertised it with whatever, and I had it, and it wasn't even that bad. So I honestly thought that it would not work in any way, and that I would never get one again. I probably will never get one again because I don't go to Subway that often. But a Subway hot dog kind of works. So anyway, that's my review of the Subway sub dog that I spent time attaining not that long ago. And so if you've seen a sub dog and you thought, geez, this looks like the worst piece of crap ever, there's no way that's going to be good. It is not good, but not bad. So there you go.
We need a segment. Things that Tim thought would be crap and turned out to be not as crap as he thought.
That's right. I mean, I'm not like a huge fast food guy or anything. Like I couldn't care less about what, KFC and McDonald's and Subway and stuff do. But I thought the concept of a sub dog was so ridiculous. And it wasn't even like it was a new thing. They've brought back the sub dog from a previous time they did it.
Yeah, the advertising said the sub dog's back. I don't think I've had Subway in the last 10 years. But annoyingly, I now want to drive what would probably be just over an hour to find a Subway and have one.
Have a sub dog or just like a normal Subway?
No, a sub dog now. Like that's...
Anyway, that's my boring life.
I'll have a sub dog if you watch The Acolyte.
That's a difficult trade-off. There's many other things I'd rather do.
It's certainly a much bigger investment on your end. I'll just send Balin to go get one while I play bloody God of War.
Well, I'm convinced that the way that your sub dog would be enhanced is if it was made an hour ago and was very
marinated.
Cold.
It's marinated, I'll just microwave it. I'm sure that'll be fine.
You can't do that.
She'll be right.
So anyway, I'm interested to hear from other people whether Subway in your country does sub dogs or whether this is an Australian only thing, because it sounds very American, like hot dogs are kind of an American thing. Does Subway in America do hot dogs? Don't know. Let me know. Anyway, that's that. Final thing. We've got AFL that we've not talked about for a long time. The AFL finals are coming up this weekend. We've got the preliminary finals and the grand final next week. Who is your tip to make it all the way? We've got the remaining teams. We've got Sydney, Port Adelaide, the Geelong Cats, and the Brisbane Lions. So Sydney play Port Adelaide tonight.
Yeah, so tonight Sydney win.
Sydney beat Port at the SCG in Sydney, you believe. So home team winning.
Yeah.
And then we've got Geelong versus the Brisbane Lions at the MCG on Saturday.
I'm 50-50 on that, but I'm going to go the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on both of those. Brisbane Lions to beat the Cats will be, I think, Brisbane's first win in Victoria for like 20 years or something. So if they can do it, so that'll be interesting. Mm-hmm. And then for the grand final, so you believe there will be Sydney versus Brisbane. Mm-hmm. Who's your tip to take it all the way? Even though we could probably tip this next week as well when it actually happens. But
I'll go Brisbane still.
Brisbane. All right, nice. Yep. I think we're on the same page on that one. So,
okay.
Yeah, hopefully we get some nice close games. The last couple of weeks have had some very close finals that have been very enjoyable to watch. Brisbane had a huge comeback in their match. I think the match against Hawthorn and Port Adelaide was very close as well, right to the final end. So I always enjoy watching the AFL finals. I think that they're very good, but obviously people from overseas like, I've never seen football before. Please stop talking about this. So that's it. I think that's it for this podcast. If you've got anything else to talk about.
No. I have to go do a ton of benchmarking for the next 36 hours. So the sooner I get to that, the better.
Yep, that'll be fun for you. I'll be checking out some God of War as well to see whether there's anything interesting in there. And that's pretty much going to do it for this week's podcast. So yeah, thanks everyone that listens to the end of our episodes. We've got the audio feed available if you are a video watcher and just prefer to get the standard audio version. Alternatively, if you're an audio listener, we've got the Hardware Unboxed podcast YouTube channel where you get to see our faces for whatever reason and this keyboard. So if you want to have a look at what that keyboard looks like, you don't want to Google it, it's well into the video. If you want to scroll through and see a small, crappy image of it, just Google it maybe. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next one.